All right, we finally have a deal in Miami. After months of posturing and suspensions and bad words and names being thrown across the table, we finally have a deal that sends Jimmy Butler over to the Golden State Warriors. And in exchange, the Miami Heat get Andrew Wiggins. On top of that, you get Kyle Anderson, Dennis Schroeder, and a protected first round draft pick. My first thoughts off the bat are this: I think Miami made out pretty solidly in this trade. And that's important, right? Because the biggest point of concern was, what was our return going to be for Jimmy Butler, who did nothing but hurt his trade value and trade stock over these last few months, right? That was the biggest challenge here for Miami. What type of value are we going to get back for a 35-year-old star who's injured, but also is having a lot of issues from an intangibles standpoint? It's really tough to trade a guy who's been suspended so many times and is also not healthy, right? Like, there's a lot of reason as to why teams were hesitant to make this big splash for Jimmy Butler. And so for them to come back with this package, pretty good. You get Andrew Wiggins, who doesn't sacrifice your team's defensive culture. He can be a really good defensive player when he puts his mind to it and when he commits to it. Also a solid complementary offensive piece to have next to a Tyler Hero and a Bam Adebayo. We've seen it before. Andrew Wiggins can get it going some nights. He actually had a 25-point game just a few nights ago. He's not an all-star scorer, but still a really good complementary scoring piece to have out there for your team. You also get Dennis Schroeder, who can also generate some solid offense. And here's the thing with Schroeder: he gives you some flexibility on the books because he's coming off his contract this coming summer. He is on an expiring deal, and teams love bringing in guys who are on these expiring contracts. There's also Kyle Anderson mixed in here, who can be a really good rotational piece, possibly coming off the bench here for this team as a defender, somebody who can also play make a bit across the court. So they made out pretty solidly in this trade, getting some really good rotational, above average rotational pieces here and there to fill out this roster a bit. Is it going to help them contend, and is it going to make them a real championship level team out in the Eastern Conference as things stand? No, right? But I still think it keeps Miami competitive. Eric Spoelstra can win with a group that has Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, and Andrew Wiggins as some of your best guys. Again, is it championship level? It's not. But we've seen this team compete with the best of them, with a lot of different supporting castmates being on the roster. And I think this is a Heat team that could make for a pretty competitive playoff series in whatever series they end up having come postseason time. Again, they're not going to win much. They're not going to get deep, but they're going to be competitive enough to make some things happen. And there's also that first round draft pick sprinkled in there, and they're going to make pretty good usage of that, right? So Miami, solid job throughout this trade, getting this particular return here for Jimmy Butler. I thought they were going to end up possibly getting like Jonathan Kuminga or Brandon Podziemski in this deal. And that's one thing with Golden State that I'm going to talk about in a second. Surprised that they didn't have to give that up in this particular trade, but still, I like how Miami made out. Solid move, does not sacrifice your present, does not completely sacrifice your future. Solid moves here. There's still some roster flexibility that they have. Not mad at it at all here for Pat Riley in an era for Miami where things have been ugly, right? This particular season for the Heat has not been good. I thought they were going to be able to contend coming into the year. Now you had to adjust. You had to move away Jimmy Butler. That was tough to do. All things considered, this was a pretty solid return after this horrific Jimmy Butler trade saga. Over to Golden State. Didn't get anything else in this deal outside of just Jimmy Butler. So here's my thoughts on that. Yes, Golden State does need to have another high-level shot creator next to Stephen Curry come postseason time. 100%. I think that was going to be the biggest issue for them this season. If Kuminga didn't turn into like this 20-point per game complete scoring option next to Steph Curry, nothing much was going to happen, right? They needed that secondary shot creation around Curry. I don't care what system Kerr runs. At this point in Curry's career, at his age, you need another solid shot creator, experienced seasoned shot creator. That had to happen in order to try to get this team to the next level. Here's your question. Are you confident that a 35-year-old Jimmy Butler, who's not at his healthiest right now, not only has he missed a significant part of this season, but he missed the postseason last year, are you comfortable having him as your second option scorer around Stephen Curry, who also himself is aging right now, right? So this trade makes sense only if you believe that Jimmy Butler still has that same value and that same ability to make the big plays in the postseason that we saw him make back in 2023. Right now, our perception on Jimmy Butler is what we saw from him in 2023. The only reason this trade makes sense is if you're assuming that you're getting the version of Jimmy Butler that you had back in 2023. Question is, are we going to get that version of Jimmy Butler back? Does he still have that ability to have a big postseason run quite like he did that year? That's the big question, right? That's the only thing that's going to make this trade make sense. You do it because you want to have another elite level shot creator next to Curry to help them win games down the stretch, not just in the regular season, but also in the postseason. But your question is, are we still going to be able to get that particular version of Jimmy Butler? Does he still have that in him? That's the question, right? This trade works if we assume that we're going to get that version of Jimmy Butler once again. And if you think that that version of Jimmy Butler is still something that is existent. Is that something that still works? Is that something that we can still get here at this point in his career? That's the big question mark, right? This trade works if that is the version of Jimmy Butler that you can get. If that is a version of Jimmy Butler that shows up come postseason time. The question right now is, what version of Butler do we have? We're not sure. We didn't get a good sample size this season for a million different reasons, the injuries and the suspensions and all of that stuff. So we don't really know what version of Jimmy Butler we are going to get. Again, going over to Miami side of things, that's why it was tough to make this move in the first place, because teams were not sure what version of Butler they were going to get. You can assume you were going to get the version from 2023, but we just don't know. We're 2 years pretty much removed from him having this amazing postseason run. His place right now amongst the best in the league is in question, right? So even for him at this point, it's kind of a prove it moment for him, right? Do you still have what it takes to be an elite level postseason player? Can you still be that elite 2023, 2022 version of Jimmy Butler that we've seen over time? That's the big question mark here, and that's the only thing that can make it make sense here for Golden State. Also, too, I think the dynamic of having Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green on the same team is hilarious. It is going to be very interesting and entertaining to see. But it also kind of going back to that point about wondering what version of Butler we're going to get. Right now, as fans, we're at a point where it's tough for us to realize that the guys that we're so used to dominating, like those veteran guys who are entering that 35 plus range, we're realizing right now that some of them may not be as effective as they once were. So again, going back to that point about wondering what version of Butler we're going to end up getting. It's kind of a theme right now as fans where we have to adjust and realize that some of these dudes may not be as effective as they once were. And that's a question mark, right? Not just for Butler, but also for guys like Kevin Durant, for guys like Stephen Curry. What are their limits right now, right? How great can they be at this particular age and at these points in their career? So that's one thing this brings to the table, is this question about how effective are the guys that we've been so used to seeing dominate over the years. Yes, they can go out and get these numbers, but are they still capable of making these massive, ridiculous postseason runs that we've seen them make in the past? So that's one thing that this makes me think about with the Jimmy Butler trade, and just wondering how effective he still is at this point in his career. Are we living in nostalgia right now with Jimmy Butler, or does he still have it? So we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting. He'll definitely be suiting up soon here for Golden State. It's a new look. He's not a massive floor spacer at all. It's one of the few times where we're seeing Stephen Curry work with a second option sort of guy who isn't an amazing floor spacer. So it's a different dynamic. It'll be interesting seeing how Steve Kerr kind of adjusts and makes this offense work, but we'll see what happens. We'll see if this gets Golden State back on track after what's been a very ugly start to the season that I thought had some promise to it once it got started. So we'll see. But solid move here from Miami, and still, even though they got another all-star caliber guy to pair along with Curry, still a bit of a question mark here for Golden State as they're looking to get right back on the right track to contention, and hopefully returning to that spot they were at in 2022 when they went to the NBA Finals.